Joining us right now, Jeff Schapiro, Richmond Times-Dispatch political reporter and columnist, covering this trial. And it is a remarkable thing, Jeff Schapiro, to see the former governor of the Commonwealth take the stand yesterday and expose such personal issues between he and his wife.
Well, Bob McDonnell has been in a tight spot on occasion in his political career and has always relied on his considerable charm, poise, and fairly advanced communications skills to talk himself out of a corner. This appears to be the case this time. Of course, it's the first time a Virginia governor has ever been indicted on a criminal offense. And, of course, the first time a governor has taken the stand in a criminal proceeding to defend himself. Governor McDonnell will be back on the stand later this morning. And we fully expect that he, under questioning by one of his attorneys, Henry Aspel, Hank to the peasants, will be discussing in some detail his marriage of 35-plus years to former Washington Redskins Maureen McDonnell. Former Washington Redskins cheerleader.
Yeah, she was not, Maureen, in fact, a linebacker for the team.
Although she might have made a nice corner. Let me ask you this: is it having any impact? Do you think? I mean, is the argument, is the story, the narrative he's laying out, is it finding its sway with the jury?
Well, one point is not clear heading into this morning's testimony, and that is whether Governor McDonnell would have testified as early in this proceeding as he is. Of course, the defense only started making its case on Monday, but for the now 19 days this trial has been underway. If there has been a constant, it has been a regular and fairly pointed trashing of Mrs. McDonnell. One wonders, one hears this particularly from lawyers who are wandering around the courthouse watching this case, whether the defense is concerned that perhaps this is all a bit too heavy-handed. And that one way to address that is to put McDonnell on the stand and allow him to be his poised, engaging, friendly, welcoming self.
But he's using that poise to continue to sort of push this narrative that there were some major problems in the marriage and that his wife was a little off-center. As this is happening and as this occurs in the courtroom, what is Mrs. McDonnell's body language like? Well, it's got to be uncomfortable.
Well, yesterday when the governor took the stand at about 3:18, Mrs. McDonnell, seated to the right of one of her, two of her lawyers, seemed to watch the governor very carefully, occasionally swiveling in her chair, at one point looking to her left where Mr. Asbill was standing, asking questions of her husband. There was an interesting exchange, unspoken exchange, about a half an hour into the governor's testimony. He recalled his ascent in politics and business as well, remembering that the couple's first child, their daughter Janine, was born in Atlanta, where the governor was working in the medical supply business at the time. He turned to his left, looking over to Mrs. McDonnell, and smiled.
Well, that's kind of touching, actually.
But I think it's important that theatrics notwithstanding, there's some very serious business before this court. The question of corruption. And there are going to be a number of questions asked of the governor, initially by the defense, and more importantly by the prosecution, about the manner in which he went about this business transaction, for lack of a better description, with Johnny Williams, the head of Star Scientific, the man who was looking for full-throated state support for his disputed dietary product, Anatablock. And as someone once said in a famous and early television comedy, someone's got some splaining to do. Why, for example, did the governor seem to go to great lengths to conceal his dealings with Johnny Williams, in particular the loans, the cash gifts, and some of the gaudier baubles, including that Rolex watch and that Manhattan shopping spree for his wife? none of which was disclosed in his compulsory ethics reports to the people of Virginia.
I guess it really comes down to, I mean, all of this talk about what was going on in their marriage aside, it really comes down to whether or not you believe the governor when he says, I didn't really know the depth of what was going on there.
Well, in Virginia, where there are no campaign finance restrictions, where the sky is the limit, where gifts to politicians are allowed as long as they are disclosed, we do have this continuing loophole in our ethics law that leaves it up to the elected official to decide what he or she chooses to disclose. It hangs on the definition, and it's something on which the law is silent, of the word friend. And if a elected official or an appointed official decides that he's received some nice gift from someone he decides or she decides is a friend, that doesn't have to be disclosed. And so one is wondering why a public official allegedly committed to transparency would engage in such conduct. And it may not have been a traditional quid pro quo, services for some gratuity in this instance, but the government contends that the Virginia voters were denied the honest services of their governor because of his conduct.
Well, and that really is the crux of it, isn't it, here, Jeff Schapiro? And that's why we've got you. Listen, you're listening to every word of this trial. We're not. But from my perspective watching this, I haven't seen where the government has proven a key issue, which is the governor did something specific for Johnny Williams in exchange for these gifts or loans or whatever you want to call them.
Again, this is something for the jury to decide. Federal law and federal case law can be very vague and intentionally so on this point, perhaps the point being that the standards for conduct for public officials tend to evolve.
Okay, but can you tell me, just objectively speaking, what has the government's already presented their case, so what did the prosecution state Governor McDonald did for Johnny Williams?
Well, of course, what the governor did, and what the governor claims is essentially no moment, was one, organize a rollout party for a Nattablock at the executive mansion, even over the concerns of his staff, who thought it was, in effect, a commercial endorsement of a product by the state's chief executive. He also allowed the company to weave into a guest list for an executive mansion event for health care leaders. And there were continuing discussions between the state over what perhaps the state might do to promote research of a Nattablock for the company.
Those were discussions, but no actual law or legislation was passed about it.
There were no discussions. There were discussions. There was no actual act in that. Right. There was not a grant from the Tobacco Commission to support the research that the company had sought. There was not a trial involving state employees. There were, of course, a lot of warnings from people on the McDonald staff that this was a tricky relationship that could get the governor in trouble.
All right. It'll be interesting to see.
We're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, Jeff. Greatly appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.